Oh hey, Vaishnava Thakur, Yoyara Sagara, Edase Karuna Kori. Oh hey, Vaishnava Thakur, Doyara Sagara Edase Karuna Kori. Diapada Chaya Shoro he amai Tomara Charana Dori. O Venerable Vaishnava Thakur, O Ocean of Mercy, be merciful to this servant of yours and purify me with the shade of your lotus feet. Your lotus feet I humbly hold. Chaya bhega dhomi, chaya dosha shodhi, chaya guna deho dase. Chaya satsanga, deho he amare, bosasi sange rashe. Page 201. By helping me control the 6 urges and purifying me of the 6 faults, bestow upon your servant the 6 good qualities. O Master, please give me the 6 kinds of holy association. I have sat down here hoping to have your company. Ekaki amar nahi pai balo arinama sankirtane. Tumi kripa kore sharabindu deya deho Krishna nama dane. Alone, I do not find the strength to chant the holy name of Hari. Please be merciful and blessing me with the drop of faith. Bestow on me the great treasure of the holy name of Krishna. Krishna se tomar, Krishna dite paro, dhomara shakati ache. Amito Kanga, Krishna Krishna bole daitava pache pache. Krishna is yours, and you can give him to me, for such is your power. This wretch is simply running behind you, crying out, Krishna, Krishna. Oh hey, Vaishnava Thakur, Doyara Sagara, Edase Karuna Kori. Jai Vaishnav Thakur, Vaishnav Thakur, Vaishnav Thakur, Jaya Vaishnav Thakur. Jai Jai Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada. Those 5 prayers. Panchika. $173. $173. Vignapti Panchaka. 5 verses opening your heart to Radha and Krishna. Matsamo nasti papatma naparadi chakaschana Parihare pilajjame kim bruve purushottama. Yuvatinam yata yuni yunam chau yuvatau yata. Mano viramate tadvan mano me manatam pari. Umau skalita padanam umireva valambanam Traidata paradanam Tvaneva sharanam prabho. Govinda balabe radhe Prarte tvam aham sada Twadiyam iti janatu Govindo mam tvayasaha. Radhe vrindavanadishe Karunamrita vahani Kripayani japadabja Jasyam mayam pradiyatam. The monument on top of the hill, it's not an ordinary hill, Chataka Parvata. We're in the vicinity of all the pastime places of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and one of them that is what I describe to be a haunting pastime. Haunting in the sense that when we hear of it or we see it, it calls to us in our heart and it stays. That's a haunting. For instance, in the first canto, 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam, Narada Muni is instructing Śrīla Vyasadeva, and he's telling him to be more direct in his preaching. In fact, he uses strong language, jagupsitam. What you've done so far, which includes editing the Vedas, putting them into 4 parts, putting together the Upanishads and the Itihasas and so forth, page turners in and of themselves, yet we find sections where the Pandavas are endeavoring for heaven and so forth, and there's hints of karma kanda, so forth. He says, Jagupsitam, this is abominable. What you've done is horrible. And he talks about, does Narada, how anything that's separate in vision from the Lord simply disturbs the mind. Like a boat on water that's blown by the wind, which when the boat has no resting place, has no anchor, it's blown here and there. So he said any kind of discussion that isn't direct about the Lord, then one becomes disturbed. And of course we know from the 10th canto, 2nd chapter, when the demigods are praying to Lord Krishna within the womb, they say, Yene ravindaksha vamuktamaninas tvayasta bhavad avashudha buddhaya aruya Kṛṣṇa parampadam tata patantyato nadrita yushmarangaraya. That unless somebody has a relationship with the lotus-eyed Lord, first of all, you have to have some information. Prabhupada writes in his purport to the invocation to the Sri Upanishad, all forms of incompleteness are due to incomplete knowledge of the complete whole. And the verse from Bhagavatam indicates one who has complete knowledge. Yene ravindaksha vamuktamaninas. There's a way in which one who knows the source of everything and the ocean of all rasa is Krishna, and then has a relationship with Krishna. That person is truly on the transcendental platform. Other types of endeavors leave one wanting. What to speak of? They're so insubstantial that one ariya Kṛṣṇa parampadam tata. They're hard work, and also patantyada yushmarangraya. You'll fall back down again because you don't have a resting place. And when one takes to devotional service, Narada said, it's so auspicious that even if one who's taken to it falls away from it, then that person, having been embraced by the Lord through the process of hearing and chanting and associating with devotees, will remember that experience again and again. And Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura calls that being haunted by rasa. One may go back to one's materialistic ways, but that person remembers again and again the beauty of the spiritual experience in association with devotees hearing about Krishna. And the pastime of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu here in Jagannath Puri, which is recounted in the Antya Lila, is that one day he was walking and he saw a sand dune. Sand dunes were obviously more visible at that time. Now they're all covered by hotels. And when he saw it, he saw Govardhan and began running at the speed of the mind for the sand dune. What I find haunting about the pastime itself is that all his devotees ran after him. There was a clamor, an alarm was raised, and they ran after Mahaprabhu, who, before he reached Parvata, had frozen in ecstasy and wasn't taking another step. Others, one devotee was lame, and he was going as fast as he could on a bad leg, running behind all the other devotees. And when Paramananda Puri and Brahmananda Bharati came, as they had come to see Mahaprabhu, and found the situation unfolding, as soon as they approached Mahaprabhu, he became a little embarrassed because they were in such an intimate situation for him to be able to be in ecstasy in front of them. He considered them venerable. So he became sober at that point and not intoxicated by rasa ecstasy. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Thakur has kept his place of bhajan here. And the name Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta is indicative of his personality. As we hear from the Adi Lila, the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kaviraj Goswami gives this admonition: Siddhanta balaya chitanakara alash iha hoite Krishna lage sudrid manosh. That's in order to have a determined mind. One's mind has to be determined. One has to be determined to carry on with one's devotional service. And actually the word determined, it has the word terminus in it, means you have to finish what you started. You can't stop, despite the fact that there may be obstacles. And in the verse, Kaviraj Goswami says, you shouldn't be lazy. Alash means to be neglectful, lazy. About what? About discussing the nuance of our relationship with Krishna and the meaning of life. Siddhanta balaya chitanakara alash. Don't be lazy. Face the hard questions, discuss them, even if there is some difference of opinion, and there always is. Discuss it, as Prabhupada used the phrase, thoroughly threadbare. You should come together, he said also, before he left the world, and just hear Srimad Bhagavatam together and discuss it, and in that way your questions will be answered. So Siddhanta Bolachittanakara Iha Hoite Krishna Loge Tsurid Manash. That in this way, in this world, you'll be able to stay steady despite the anomalies that all of us face, which we were discussing when we were over at the Gopinath Mandir. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, of course, the word Siddhanta, once I took a class from Pradyumna Prabhu, the devotee from the early days of ISKCON, he was Prabhupada's Sanskrit editor who traveled with him everywhere, because Prabhupada, although he was traveling from one place to another, his other work didn't stop. He continued translating his books and giving commentary, and he needed his staff with him, especially his Sanskrit editor, Pradyumna. And he once was commenting on the word Siddhanta, and he said it means to come to pinpoint accuracy in understanding a concept. He said you must understand what it is and also what it isn't, to be that clear. And the reason I bring up the context of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta is because he held the torch for Lord Chaitanya's movement, passed to him by his father, the great Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, who had been the revivalist of Lord Chaitanya's movement, greatly empowered soul, also once called the seventh Goswami, because the Goswamis had been empowered by Lord Chaitanya to reveal the pastime places of Krishna and Vrindavan, and to write about rasa pastimes, to speak of the step-by-step process, for instance, in the Upadeshamrita. And Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura had also revealed Lord Chaitanya's birthplace, but to speak of all his teachings, which had been obscured by time. Those who, like Madhavananda Prabhu, are always searching for shastras here, there, and everywhere and preserving them, know that sometimes they're lost. In fact, Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu told me once he was looking for a particular shastra. It was at a time when there was a project called Matsya, before we stole the title and took it over, in which devotees were going and finding ancient scriptures, and they were putting them on kids. Don't be disturbed. Microfiche. It's not a fish. It was a way of storing information before nowadays, where there are clouds and all kinds of other things. It was actually a film, and that was one of the ways that you'd store information. They were recording all those things. And he said it took him 1.5 years to find a particular scripture he was looking for. And it wasn't so easy, and he realized that things can be lost over time. And Lord Chaitanya's movement, in fact, had been obscured over time. What to speak of perverted? By degrees, people invent and innovate with the philosophy, and slowly it becomes something completely different, or something that's actually the antithesis of what the original teacher had intended. And there were quite a few of those deviant groups who were teaching various philosophies. Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura first of all had revived the awareness of Lord Chaitanya's teachings and his movement. He had looked for the Chaitanya Charitamrita at one point and had difficulty finding it. We're trying to put an end to that. Prabhupada published it, and he wanted it, to everybody's surprise, distributed in mass. And oftentimes when books that devotees thought weren't very bridgy, and they'd ask Prabhupada, how many do you want? And he named in the hundreds of thousands. They were sometimes taken aback, because you go to a baseball game and somebody walks away with an Upadeshamrita. Turn to the last page. And as we've heard from Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta through the lectures of Prabhupada and his teachings, that Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was a great pioneer and he had prayed for a way to flesh out his vision for a movement that would bring Lord Chaitanya's teachings to people all over the world. And then he prayed, and he received the answer from the Lord. It was his son, his own son, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Ṭhākura, whose nickname was the living encyclopedia. As a child, people noticed he had a photographic memory. Whatever he would read, whatever it was, whatever he'd hear, he'd just remember all of it. And by his 7th year, he knew all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita. But not just that. We've seen that a lot, actually, even nowadays, right? Even in your family. And there's some, who is that? Her niece, who tested her, wherever that was, at Govardhan or somewhere. She knows the whole, just name any verse, she knows it. But he also knew all the commentaries and could give commentary on all the verses and so forth, and distinguished himself scholastically, Surya Siddhanta, and became a noted scholar among scholars even in his adolescence, and was awarded the title of Siddhanta Saraswati. So there's a way that he had a way of emulating his father and accepted him as his Shiksha Guru. It accepted Harinam from him. And Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, unlike many previous Gaudiya sadhus who lived in seclusion and had been satisfied to stay in holy places, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura knew a lot about the world. He was trained in law, and he was a high court judge, and very much in demand. He had a record of solving or closing more cases that didn't get reversed on appeal than any other judge, and therefore people wanted him everywhere. Besides, he was a local, and the British were still ruling at that time. And meanwhile, he would spend time writing his literatures. He wrote over 100 books. If anybody's ever written a pamphlet, you know how hard it is. And then even when you're done, somebody will notice, I think you spelled it wrong, or whatever it may be. What to speak of writing a book? It's like building a house, and it's practically never done even after you finish it. But to speak of multiple books, 100, he wrote over 100. And meanwhile, he was raising a family. It wasn't a small family. He had many children, and he also had a very demanding job. So one of his sons was Bimal Dutt. Bimal means, Bimal Prasad Dutt. That he was, Bimal means like effulgence. And he came up as a brilliant child, but then astutely followed the teachings of his father. And Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, with his integration in society, he had been part of an intellectual group in which people, scholars, and there were quite a few of them in Bengal, intellectuals, were concocting a universal religious idea to try to harmonize things and put together various ideas that people could take up. But as many acharyas come into the world, and they seem to have this trajectory of evolvement, this is one of the ways that great acharyas come, and then they show this path of apparently following the worldly ways, but then they manifest their spiritual powers in such a way that they're undeniable. And so was the case with Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, who was arguably one of the first converts to Lord Chaitanya's movement in the modern age. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was here, there were converts who joined him, not the least of which were Jagai Madai, and of course thousands of others. And then Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura became the greatest advocate for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement. And he had a vision of how to integrate it in such a way that people all over the world would be able to take it up. He wasn't interested in sitting in solitary bhajan. And this goes with the very mood of our sampradaya, which is notably messianic and outward-looking, to give it to all people. Our Prabhupada frequently quoted Prahlada Maharaj, naivodvije duratyaya-vaitaraṇyās, in which he says that I don't want to go to a solitary place. And previous verses, he said similar things. Mauna, vrata, people taking these vows, going to the Himalayas and so forth, said, I don't want to do any of that. I want to be in the city where the most population, the thickest population is, so I can help alleviate the ignorance of these people that they're carrying on their head as a burden. So Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta carried the mantle from Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. One of the notable incidents was when there was a great power struggle between the Smartas and the Vaishnavas. So Smartas held a political grip on the religious rights and processes with their idea of it being given by birthright. And Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura was, of course, teaching the Bhagavat version of what qualifies somebody to be considered a teacher. And when Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura couldn't attend a conference where this debate would take place on a kind of national or almost world stage, world for all the Vaishnavas, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta showed him an essay that he had written on the matter, and Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, being too ill to go, sent his son, who achieved a huge victory there, so much so that the crowd, and in India, when there's crowds, there's really crowds, had noted his adroitness in arguing the topic from Shastra, and having seen his powerful nature, there was a time near the end of the program where everyone wanted to touch his feet, and there was a risk of stampede. If you've ever been in one of those, I was once in Kartik on the parikram, the last Ekadashi of Kartik, and got stuck down in Keshi Ghat in that cave that goes through, and there was a tunnel, and it was 10 people could come in, but one person at a time could go out, and they just kept coming. And I thought, well, actually I didn't think, well, I thought, what am I going to do now? I was looking for higher ground. In any case, they all charged. They wanted it. They were spontaneously attracted to his eruditeness, as well as his clear stature as an exalted Vaishnava. They wanted to take the dust from his feet. So some smart person there, who should have been a temple president or something, then had obtained a huge bucket or barrel, and somehow or other had dipped Srila Saraswati's lotus feet in that water, and then saved everyone's life by distributing the water and quelling the crowd. So he rose to a very high position. He had connections with kings, with government officials, and a couple principles, just to have something to take away that's practical and not to extend this unlimitedly. One of the principles that he is most known for is yukta vairagya. Yena tena pakarena mana Krishna niveshayat. The essence of the process for spreading Krishna consciousness, somehow or other, facilitate people remembering Krishna. The rules and regulations, they can come later. Our Prabhupada had demonstrated this in such a artful and almost humorous way by giving initiation to a group of fledgling Vaishnavas in San Francisco. And afterwards, after they had gone out after the initiation for donuts, and they came home, they found a paper tacked on their door listing the regulative principles. Yena tena prakarena. First, help them remember Krishna, and then you can tell them the rules later. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati notably went against the grain of those who were attached to superficiality in presenting Krishna consciousness, so much so that demonstratively he came to Radhakund in a conveyance, a nice car, which was unheard of for Vaishnav sannyasis. They would walk barefoot everywhere and wear very simple cloth, and he came dressed, and there's pictures of this, of him dressed to the hilt in modern clothes and what's because shoes and so forth. And he thus showed that the main principle was to facilitate people remembering Krishna in any means they could, and one of the ways was to find the ways to attract people from the West, which is the instruction that he gave to his disciple by Charanaravinda. And recently when we were in Altadunga Road and we walked up the steps that were preserved, they were the same steps that our Prabhupada walked up to meet Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta. It felt momentous. He went there, and when he offered obeisances, everybody knows Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta gave him the instruction. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta empowered him to take whatever means. He preached that use technology. In fact, most thrilling experience I've had in a long time, or in this lifetime at all, was the first time we went on our yatra to the Bug Bazaar Mandir, and the Gaudiya Math was still finishing their museum. But because we had Hansapriya with us, she wouldn't take no for an answer, and she kept saying, no, there's a Prabhupada disciple here, and he wants to see the printing press. And they said, we can't show it to you because the museum's not open, and we don't want to show it to anybody. But minus all the details, she was able to convince them. And they took us, just 2 or 3 of us, up to see it. And the room was still scattered with building materials and so forth, but there sat the printing press, at least one of them they had preserved. And the greatest revelation for me of that was walking around the back of it as I was circumambulating and seeing the placard on it that said Cleveland, Ohio. It was made in America. And that's emblematic of the Yukta Vairagya that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, that was the highest technology that you could get at the time for printing. And he sent for those to be shipped, obviously, back there to Calcutta. And he kept them running constantly because he wanted to use all technology and all means to help people remember Krishna. A second principle that he's famous for is his definition of darshan. In fact, it comes in a very easily understandable mantra in English that is so helpful, because one might tend to get an anxiety about advancing in Krishna consciousness. Why can't I see Krishna? And by the way, why is he messing up my life? And so forth. That's the mantra of the material world. But Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Thakur said, don't try to see Krishna. Try to serve in such a way that he'll want to see you. Isn't that helpful? It calms you down right away, and you just think, well, let me do a little service. Maybe I can sweep the road, or I can wash some pots, or I can find out what I'm supposed to do. In fact, someone just yesterday was telling me he got advice from his guru. He was asking what he's supposed to do, or should he do this or that, and he said, follow the instruction you've been given, and you'll be fine. So Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta would come into temples without his spectacles, and when offered them, he would sometimes reply that I haven't come here for an eye exercise to look at the Lord. I've come here for him to see me. That also helps when we go for darshan. It's Krishna seeing us. In fact, he would stand near the back, near the Garuda Stamba, according to the Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Vaibhav, the book written by His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Maharaj, because he said Krishna will look out for his devotee, a Garuda, and then he'll see me standing underneath him. And that's telling, isn't it? That this is the method, as Gopi Paranadhana Prabhu used to say, it's not what you know in Krishna consciousness that counts, it's who you know and what you are, those two things. So keeping in mind his principle of darshan is extremely helpful. That go to be seen, show up so you can see so the Lord can see you, and serve in such a way the mood in which he'll notice that here's my servitor, he's serving the devotees. And then thirdly, highly notable was his bent for distribution of literature. I just mentioned, of course, the printing press. It's on his logo, and above the logo he had there's a lot in that logo. Modern logo makers, they just make a little swoosh or a dot, and from that abstract you're supposed to get everything else. He put everything on there, so there was nothing left for speculation. And he had a printing press on the logo, amongst many others. It's actually in the book. What page? Anyway, when you find it, let me know. And above it, it says Rag Marg, above the printing press. And that's unique in our line coming from Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Thakur. And who imbibed it? Our founder Acharya, who said, I took it from my spiritual master's mouth that he was very fond of books. Page 54? 264. Page 264, you can take a look at and then you'll see the printing press at about 5 o'clock. And there's a madanga and a printing press. And he coined the phrase Briya Madanga. And above that, you'll see Radha Krishna at 3 o'clock. And above the madanga and the printing press and below Radha and Krishna, it says Rag, meaning the Rag Marg. It's a path of spontaneous devotional service. There's something very practical about our founder Acharya's, Srila Prabhupada's teachings, in which he advocated for using your senses to do good for others. In fact, he says that that's one of the ways in which, the best way, in fact, he says in the Bhagavad Gita, to control the mind is by thinking about how to do good for others. And then, as Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta opined, there are so many false philanthropic endeavors people engage in. For instance, people think of, well, let me feed people. And then he'd point out that in the course of doing that, they kill many animals. And there are other ideas about how to do good for others, but the highest conception is to give them the torchlight of knowledge. And it just happens to be in our line that all of our acharyas, starting from Srila Vyasadeva, and then you see Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya, you see the Goswamis, you see our more modern acharyas, Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura. Look at their photos, they're all posing with books, every one of them. And this is one of the practical aspects of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Thakur. He wanted that there be the mass distribution of transcendental literatures to the world, and it was well known when I joined the Krishna consciousness movement, because Prabhupada mentioned it several times, that in the Mutt, the Gaudiya Mutt under Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, that if a brahmachari went out and distributed, he said, a 1 paisa magazine, because they used to make all kinds of publications, and he would come back, then Srila Guru Maharaj's Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, he would announce it to the whole assembly of the devotees that he has done some real service. He had distributed a 1 paisa magazine. He considered it so important. So we have that legacy, and that was the way of organizing for many people to come, and especially for people from the West. That was the mission given to Srila Prabhupada from Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, and the ideas of humble service and yukta vairagya, using everything. We inherited that from Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura and Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Thakur, who brought that to us and gave us the way of life that we take for granted perhaps now. But that's all coming from our Guru Varga. It's bequeathed these invaluable principles to us that we can take advantage of to invoke the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Om Tat Sat. Time to go. You should be back by 2, so you say a few words.
Gurave Gurachandraya Radhikaya Tadalaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tad Bhaktaya Namo Namaha. Many questions come in these places. Sometimes my Guru Maharaj, he would give talks and he'd almost always ask questions. And I learned that sometimes a good question is even more important, more valuable than a good answer, because it makes us think. So here's a few questions about this place. Why are the deities called Vinod Madhav and not Radha Vinod Madhav? And if you start singing, I've experienced, if you start singing Jaya Radha Vinod, they'll shut you down. Why Vinod Madhav, not Radha Vinod Madhav? Why does Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta make his bhajan kutir on top of the hill and put the deities down lower than him? Third question. If Mahaprabhu saw this place, Chataka Parvat, as Govardhan, why did he walk on it? Because when Jagannātha Pandit went to Vrindavan, Mahaprabhu told him, don't walk on Govardhan Hill. And to tack another question on, which is maybe a little related, maybe some of you have been to Govardhan, maybe you've seen the temple built by Madhavendra Puri. Now, we don't have photos of him building the temple, but unless he was using a helicopter construction company, 100% he walked on the hill. So this is our questions before us. So Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta, he came here. This was the last place that he came before he left this world in Kolkata at the Bagh Bazar Gaudiya Mutt, where we were at 2 days ago. And it was here, as Vaisheshika was saying, that one Grihastha devotee from Bombay at that time wrote him a letter and said, Guru Maharaj, I'm very unfortunate. I'm a Grihastha. I can't do service like the brahmacharis and sannyasis. What can I do? And it was here that he got that letter. And it was here that he wrote a response that Grihastha devotee's name was Abhay Charnarabinda. And Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta wrote him a letter back, and he said, you should preach. And he said something which always struck me. He said that when you preach, it'll be good for you, and it'll be good for the people who help you. And I always thought, how does he know anybody's going to help him? And in that sense, I feel Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta predicted all of us. And this is really our home, where this movement really began. We were on a movement right now. I want to read you a verse from the Brihanaradiya Purana from the first canto. Sakyam saptapadinam shat ityahur dharmakovida. That persons who are dharmakovida, they understand that if you walk 7 steps with someone, that person becomes your friend. Or if you exchange 7 words with them, they're your friend. And you all experience that on Harinam and on book distribution. People become your friends. And he goes on, Satam saptapadi maitri satsadam tri padi tata. But if someone is a saintly person, a satjana, then just 3 steps or 3 words. And he goes on, Satsatam apiye santas, and there's Santa, not Santa Claus, but a really saintly person. Tesham maitri pade pade. Every step you take, you develop friendship with them. So I'm thinking to myself, why has Krishna arranged for me to get association with Vaisheshika Prabhu and with all of you? What does it mean for me? What is happening to me? I'd like to share my little reflection based also on this place with you. So we're walking together, we're exchanging some words together on one level, but what words are we exchanging and where are we walking together? We're walking in this place. We're exchanging, you're going to these places and reciting verses from the Bhagavatam, singing these wonderful songs. This creates a samskara. It creates friendship in your group. But it gives us something from these places also. And what is the special quality of this place? In an article that he wrote toward the end of his days, Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta said some very high philosophy, which I'm just going to take a few grains of rice from. He said that broadly there are 2 types of devotees with 2 types of attitudes. One is called Bhakta Abhiman, and the second is called Acharya Das Abhiman. I'm trying to answer our questions through this article. So Bhakta Abhiman means a devotee, someone who thinks I'm a devotee. And he said, this is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's in that mood, feeling like I'm a devotee. Gorkishore Das Babaji was in that mood. I'm a devotee. And so then there's focuses on Nam Bhajan. But he said, here at this place, our focus is Acharya Das Abhiman. And therefore he said, we built this temple on top of the hill, and this is the place of Srimati Radharani, that Bhajan Kutir. And therefore the deities are named Vinod Madhav, after his father's deities, Radha Madhav. But Vinod Madhav, Vinod means someone who gets some pleasure from Radharani, on a lower level. And he says this place on top of the hill, this is a place of service. And there's 2 deities there. There's a deity of Madhvacharya and a deity of Vyasadeva. Why is he sees it as Radharani's place, and he has a deity of Madhva and Vyasadeva? Why? Because that's Acharya Das Abhiman. Thinking not for myself, which is Bhakta Abhiman, I'm a devotee, but rather thinking I'm a servant of the Acharyas. I'm a servant of Vyasadeva. I'm a servant of Madhvacharya. I'm a servant of Srimati Radharani. And this is her place. And this is the mood of this place. And therefore Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu walked on the hill to show service. Because when Mahaprabhu did that, it's a big word from a small mouth, but Mahaprabhu was experiencing what we would call Manjari Bhav. Because he saw in his vision when the devotees brought him back that he was serving Radha and Krishna together. He wasn't thinking he was Krishna. He wasn't thinking he was Radharani. But he was seeing himself as their servant. And it was that spirit of service to the higher persons, to service to Lalita and Vishaka and others, that Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta saw in this place. And therefore he built his Bhajan Kutir on top of the hill, not as a Bhajan Kutir, but as a place of service. And therefore Madhavendra Puri walked on Govardhan Hill to do service for Govardhan. And Mahaprabhu walked in, and Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati built his house on top of this hill here. So we're walking together, and we're getting some reflections. We're getting something in all these different places. If we move together as friends, if we go in these different places, and we're not coming empty-handed or empty-headed, but we're coming to hear Kṛṣṇa-kathā. We're coming to recite verses and sing songs in these places. We're going to get blessings, and we're going to get something which is going to come inside of all of us. And we'll all become more of a group. We'll be more friends. And that friendship, that sangha, is a very special sangha. This is a family of Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Ṭhākura. This is a few reflections I had about this place. So we'll stop there.
Tuk-tuk's on the way back. Okay, everyone gets a free ride on a tuk-tuk going back, and if you want to, we'll go back and we'll have prasadam. How's that sound? Sounds okay. It was an ecstatic day, and please write down your reflections, and we can share more tonight. Dear Śrīla Prabhupada, dear Śrīla Bhaktisiddhānta Saraswati Ṭhākura, dear Śrīla Bhaktivinoda Ṭhākura, if you so desire, please instill in our hearts your compassionate mood for spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. Please give us intelligence to know what real yukta vairagya is, so we can use everything properly to attract people to come to Krishna consciousness. Please let us work in humble service to your lotus feet in ways that will please you. Thank you for considering our request. Om Tat Sat. Everyone agrees with these prayers in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vanchakalpadrvascha kripasinameva patitanam pavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha nantakoti vaishnaviniki jai gaur premanande. A special appreciation and kudos to all those who are on the backup team, who are carrying the mats around and the chairs and the cameras and making it seem seamless. Thank you very much and all the other services I didn't mention for those too. Thank you, Hare Krishna. Okay, we'll see you all back, or on the marg on the way back. Yeah. Don't be lazy, face the hard questions. Will you wrap this up?